Puedes iniciar.
Buenos días. El Instituto Nacional de Antropología e Historia, a través de la Coordinación Nacional de Arqueología, la Dirección de Estudios Arqueológicos e INATV, les da la más cordial bienvenida al ciclo de conferencias Arqueología Mundial, el quehacer arqueológico en otras latitudes bajo diferentes ópticas. El día de hoy tendremos la conferencia de la doctora Federica Ugliano. El día de hoy tendremos la conferencia de la doctora Federica Ugliano titulada Predynastic Egypt, The Time Before Pharaohs, Hieroglyphs and Pyramids. La doctora Ugliano está actualmente contratada como curadora de la colección predinástica del Museo Egipcio de Turín, Italia. Se graduó en Egiptología de la Universidad de Milán y de la University College London. En 2016 obtuvo un doctorado en arqueología especializada en ciencias del patrimonio cultural de la Universidad de Trento, con una tesis relativa al estudio de la colección predinástica del Museo Egipcio de Turín, de la cual realizó la curaduría de su reexhibición entre 2014 y 2015. De 2017 a 2022, Federica trabajó en varios proyectos postdoctorales de la Universidad de Pisa y el Consejo Nacional de Investigación de Italia. Desde 2006 ha participado en varias excavaciones en Italia y Egipto, en sitios como Luxor, Abidos y Heliopolis. Sus intereses principales incluyen la cultura material del periodo predinástico, la historia de la investigación arqueológica a inicios del siglo XX y el estudio de archivos egipcios. Antes de dar inicio, es importante mencionar que la conferencia será dictada en inglés y desafortunadamente no contaremos con traducción simultánea, por lo que ofrecemos una disculpa. Les pedimos que al final de la presentación de la doctora Ugliano formulen sus preguntas a través del chat de YouTube. Nos ayudaría mucho que fueran en inglés para transmitirlas con mayor agilidad a la ponente, pero si fueran en español, haremos el mejor esfuerzo por realizar una buena traducción. Sin más preámbulo, damos la bienvenida a nuestra invitada. Good night for you, Dr. Ugliano. We really appreciate that you had accepted to be part of this series of conferences. It is an honor and a pleasure to have your participation. This forum is all yours. Welcome.
Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen now. Okay. So thank you for dear Ile for having invited me for this very interesting series of conference. And what I'm going to talk about today is, in fact, a very peculiar subject. There is like pre-dynastic Egypt, so the time before pharaohs, hieroglyphs, and pyramids. And I wanted to start today's talk, in fact, from the end of the story. So showing you this artifact, the so-called Narmer palette, which is dated at the end of the 4th millennium BCE. Egyptology scholars and students are well familiar with this object, which marks the beginning of the history of pharaonic Egypt. You can clearly see on one side here the traditional iconography of the pharaoh smiting his enemy with a stone mace head mounted on a stake. Above the head of the defeated enemy, there are some signs that identify him as coming from the Nile Delta. This is the iconographic synthesis of the unified kingdom and the beginning of pharaonic Egypt. But it's important to bear in mind that before pharaonic Egypt, before hieroglyphs, and before pyramids, there is in fact a very long prehistoric phase, which starts at the end of the so-called last glacial maximum and is characterized by cultural and severe climatic changes that had great impact on the population of Egypt, which for several millennia was in fact moving between the Green Desert and the Nile Valley. What we define as pre-dynastic phase is in fact at the very end of this long period. It lasts for about 1,000 years, so it's quite a long period, and coincides with the 4th millennium BCE. One of the main problems of this phase is related to the definition of a precise absolute chronology. C14 radiocarbon dates are still too few compared to the extent of the period, and much work still needs to be done. So we are basically working within a frame of a relative chronology based on the development of the material culture. The first definition of the pre-dynastic subphases that you can see here on the left and cultures was proposed by Petrie, an English archaeologist, at the end of the 19th century. Now, in fact, we try to avoid this definition because they are strongly linked with the ethnic and racial connotation originally implied by the scholar. So we are using instead the name of an archaeological site, Nakada, which was one of the first to provide artifacts datable to the pre-dynastic, so to the 4th millennium BCE. To give you a general overview of the dating of those subphases, I would like to propose you the chronology that the Museo Egizio curators developed, which of course is oversimplified because of museum purposes. But as you can see here, the word pre-dynastic refers more or less to the first 3 quarters of the 4th millennium BCE, while it can be sometimes used to define the whole millennium, including also the so-called proto-dynastic period, which starts with the first appearance of writing, so around 3300 BCE. So looking closely at the pre-dynastic period, which we are focusing on, and when I talk about pre-dynastic today, I'm referring especially to it in stricter terms, so this period that you can see here, you can notice that some data are in fact, some dates are in fact overlapping. So we have the same, more or less, dates, but different names. And I'm going to show you briefly why we have like this double terminology for the same period, because pre-dynastic is a quite a complicated period. Basically, the different terminology reflects the presence during the first half of the 4th millennium BCE of 2 main clusters of recurring types of artifacts and customs, mainly burial customs, which we can define Nakada, or Upper Egyptian culture, and Maadi Buto, or Lower Egyptian culture. Starting from half of the 4th millennium, as you can see in the picture in the middle, around 3000 and 500 BCE, we start observing a sort of homogenization, I mean, like a cultural convergence between the 2 different traditions. Yes?
Probably, okay, I think that the transmission stopped, but let me ask, are we, al aire, ¿estamos bien? ¿Sigue la transmisión? Porque vi que te desconectaste. I think she's back, so
we can, yeah.
Okay, we can continue. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so as I was saying, as you can see here in the picture, at a certain point, I mean, in the middle, around half of the 4th millennium BCE, we see that we have this kind of homogenization, so a cultural convergence between the 2 different traditions, with a northward spreading of the southern ones. So, was it acculturation, imitation, political influence, military conquest? as you can imagine, scholars are still highly debating on this topic. But the result is that at the beginning of the 3rd millennium BCE, there was a unified state led by a divine ruler with a complex hierarchical society. So after this very short and I hope clear presentation of the pre-dynastic period, I'm going now to focus on my research that is based at the Museo Egizio in Turin, Italy, that is situated in northwestern part of Italy. And the Museo Egizio was founded in 1824. So as you can see also from the header, this year marks the bicentenary of the museum. So it was founded 200 years ago after the acquisition of a private collection that was called the Drovetti collection by the King of Italy, Carlo Felice, from the House of Savoy. And it was later enriched by patron donations, purchases on the antiquity market at the beginning of the 20th century, and objects coming from excavations in Egypt, promoted by the Italian archaeological mission between 1903 and 1937. Here you can see a composition like this chart show more or less, the different material that we are now preserving at the Egyptian Museum of Turin. That is the 2nd largest collection of Egyptian antiquities outside Egypt. So after Cairo Museum, there is the collection of Egyptian Museum in Turin. And quite unsurprisingly, I would say, pottery bases are the majority, of course, of the material that we have in the museum. And then here you can see the basic classes of archaeological materials, so stone vases, bangles, baskets, ivory tusks, hair combs, human remains, hairpins, statuettes, flint tools, lithic tools, cosmetic pipes, and mace heads. Here, maybe with an image, it's slightly clearer. So what in fact are the basic cultural artifacts that we have for the pre-dynastic period? On top, you can see some of the main types of pottery. So with this very kind of distinctive black top pottery, this decorated pottery. And we have, as I was saying before, like bangles of different material, like incised tusks, decorated hairpins. Those on the bottom left are the so-called cosmetic palettes that are in fact palettes that were used to grind the pigments that then were used for cosmetics. And then on this other side, on the left bottom, you have the mace heads that we saw before in the iconography of the pharaoh smiting the enemies. So those were in fact the stone mace heads that were used, to smite the enemies. And of course here, some of the lithic tools dated to the pre-dynastic period. So this very nice, we call it fishtail knife on the bottom right, and other kind of knives, points, sickle blades, so all the different kind of material made of this very characteristic flint. When I started working on this collection, so more or less more than 10 years ago, what I would like to do was in fact to bridge, the gap that usually we have between museum collections and current excavations. So my idea was in fact to try to connect, our collection, going back to the archives in order to retrieve the original archaeological context of the objects, but also try to establish a dialogue with the excavations currently carried out at the same sites excavated in Egypt that, of course, are producing new artifacts. So I decided, together with my co-director, Dr. Giulio Lucarini, to start this project that is called PREMU, so Prehistoric Egypt Museum Collection Project, that was very generously funded by the Ethnos Kalos Foundation and is currently hosted at the National Research Council of Italy, Rome, and the Museo Egizio. So our main aims were in fact, the analysis of unpublished archival documents in order to retrieve the archaeological context of Egyptian prehistoric and pre-dynastic artifacts dated to the second half of the 4th millennium BC, the technotypological and functional analysis of the pre-dynastic ceramic and lithic artifacts stored at the Museo Egizio, the collaboration, of course, with other projects or teams involved in the study of prehistoric pre-dynastic Egypt, courses, seminar and supervision of BA, MA, and PhD students, and of course, dissemination, storytelling, and exhibition curatorship. Of course, working with a museum collection could be challenging. We need to face the truth. There are many, many cons. And for example, very, very few stratigraphic context information. Sometimes lack of museum standards in describing and cataloging of the materials that are not yet inventoried. So there is a long, long process of preliminary sorting of this material and inventorying. Then, of course, it's also important to try to assess the sampling strategies adopted by the excavators in the past. So we are dealing with collection excavated at the beginning of the 20th century. So also archaeology was quite different at the time. So of course we are lacking the same standards that we have today. So we are not sure, in fact, if our data set is representing the site production. And of course, especially for people dealing with pottery, as I'm doing now, it's not possible to produce fresh fractures. So we need to study, pottery fracture without producing new, without, the possibility of breaking, the fracture, the pottery in order to observe, for example, the composition. And of course, there are some pros. Otherwise, it would not have been worthy to start, this kind of projects. And I'm referring in particular to the accessibility of the material, to the museum facilities, and the support of the collection management office that I would really like to thank for their constant support. The possibility to perform in-depth analysis virtually without time constraints. The material is there. So we can go back to the material even if we haven't, finished our analysis. Then, of course, it's possible to perform scientific, destructive, and non-destructive analysis. We have a considerable number of specimens, so also this is another pro. Then, of course, it's possible to start a dialogue, as I was saying before, with the current excavations carried out at the same sites excavated in the past. And then what I think it's really, really interesting from my point of view is to test different theoretical and scientific and practical approaches to the same data set. So we can even have, different interpretations starting from the same data set. So going a little bit into detail, I would like to present a case study, of course, and I'm focusing now on this site, especially that is called Heliopolis, that was excavated by the Italian Archaeological Mission at the beginning of the 20th century, and that produced, in fact, two sides. I'm just focusing on Egypt, and you can see the site of Heliopolis, where it's located. So in the Nile Delta, and where it's nowadays. So you can clearly see that it's completely surrounded by modern Cairo, because Heliopolis today is in fact a suburb of the city of Cairo. So we are exactly in the city of Cairo. But the city of Heliopolis, and the name Heliopolis means city of the sun, has been known since ancient time as the place of the creation of the world for the ancient Egyptians. And many scholars from different times visited the city and were so impressed by the outstanding nature of the fragments of these monumental archaeological remains. But despite being one of the most important sites from the historical and religious points of view, we need to wait until the beginning of the 20th century for the first, let's say, scientific investigation of Heliopolis by Ernesto Schiaparelli, the director of the Museo Egizio of Turin. Heliopolis was among the first concessions obtained by the Italian Archaeological Mission, and Schiaparelli was able to conduct 4 archaeological missions between 1903 and 1906. But regardless of his extensive work, Schiaparelli never published the results of his excavations. So we have like a first problem. However, he did leave several notes, diaries, letters, and photographs that were synoptically analyzed in order to retrieve the original archaeological context of the excavated material. And the predynastic settlement, which he and his Egyptian team were able to identify and to excavate, is situated with high probability in this area that is called the Com area that you can see highlighted by the yellow arrow. And it is quite interesting to note that Schiaparelli, in his notes, is giving a kind of stratigraphic sequence. And you can see here, starting from the surface level and going, deep, of course, into until, the virgin soil, let's say. Of course, it's not a really stratigraphic sequence because it's basically, artificial cut every meter. But still, it's interesting because at least we have an idea of the stratigraphical sequence of the site that was constantly inhabited since the prehistory to the late Roman and Arabic times. So we have like theoretically a complete sequence. But it's also quite interesting to see that we have a kind of a gap of more than a millennium between prehistoric time and Old Kingdom and the so-called New Kingdom. And this was quite strange. So, in fact, Schiaparelli's, sequence was questioned, has been questioned for a very, very long time, and was not considered to be completely 100% reliable. But in this case, new excavations came to rescue, because a similar, in fact, stratigraphic sequence with predynastic layers lying directly beneath the Ramesside period has been recently uncovered by the Egyptian-German mission working on this site, so in Heliopolis. This mission, that is called, the Heliopolis project, found the remains of a predynastic brewery here. So for the production of beer that was in predynastic period, and this brewery was located less than 500 meters southwest of the area excavated by the Italian mission. So we can now assess that the preliminary observations made by Schiaparelli were mostly correct, and they can allow us to strictly connect the results of the old excavations with the current ones. Of course, this was the situation when we started our project, and you can see here how our student, Camillo, had to deal for his master dissertation with a huge of lithic material. So this is the beginning of the project, so a little bit of, panic. But then, okay, we started to think about, our research questions. So what was possible to do with this kind of material? So I started, dealing with the pottery. I left the lithic to my colleague, who is an expert in lithic studies, that is Dr. Giulio Lucarini. So for the pottery, my basic, research questions were basically the chronology. So I was trying to see if it was possible to define at least a terminus ante, a postquem for the predynastic phase of this settlement. So for the settlement of Heliopolis, working on typology, of course, the comparison with published data, and the comparison with current excavations. Then from a museum point of view, it was really interesting for me to go a little bit deeper into the biography of these objects. So not only from their production, but also their story after their excavation, so after they came to the museum. So in order to retrieve their itineraries. And third, I was really interested in the technological study and the manufacturing process of this pottery. So as I said, to rely on petrography, the analysis of the phytoliths, the study of the microtraces, and the CT scan in order to define the fabric groups, the temper that we use for producing this pottery, to define the chaîne opératoire, so the different steps of the production of this material, and then which kind of production was it like a specialized production and home-based production. So with number of 5,945 originally stored in 40 boxes have been divided in three main groups. So predynastic, doubtful, and other dating. Only 624 have been originally assigned a single or group inventory numbers. So after having been counted and divided, all have been tagged and inventoried according to the original subdivision into boxes. As short notes that Schiaparelli left in the boxes came to light. And they were so precious because they gave us some indications of the finds position of the sherds in the relation to the stratigraphical sequence that I showed you before. So while the post-predynastic sherds have been put back in storage boxes, the predynastic and doubtful ones have been arranged in different trays. Predynastic and doubtful sherds have been described according to fabric, surface treatment, dimension, inner, outer surface, and fracture color, temper, and state of preservation, and have also been noted. The diagnostic rings, bases, preserved for more than 5% of their diameter and inked with an original inventory number, together, of course, with all the decorated body fragments, have been drawn in order to create a typological subdivision of wares and groups. I mean, due to the lack of precise contextual information, this step allowed for a comparison of our material with better excavated, documented, and published specimens in order to define the chronological horizon of the predynastic settlement of Heliopolis. And here you can see some of the typologies that I developed for the predynastic settlement of Heliopolis. And here some of the decorate, as you can see, the fragments are really, really sometimes tiny fragments, but they could also be informative, especially the decorated one, because they are like good chronological markers, especially the imports from Upper Egypt. And here you can see that the only way that I had to propose a chronology was in fact to rely on published data, so to make a comparison with my typologies with the ones that were already published for other sites that were, of course, excavated in very recent years. So starting from 1980s of this past century, so not at the beginning of the 20th century, so which were really able also to give subphases. And for me, it was really important because I could rely on their chronological definition. But after the first sorting and inventorying operation has been carried out, and following the definition of this chronotypological horizon, a team of specialists in different fields of pottery studies have been involved for the second phase of the project. So Dr. Silvia Micone for the petrographic analysis, Dr. Jacques Bajot and Dr. Vanessa Forte for technological examination, and Dr. Rita Hartmann in representation of the Heliopolis project team for the comparison with the results from the current excavations. So despite the difficulties caused by the impossibility of producing fresh breaks, the macroscopic observation allowed for the identification of 7 main fabric groups here illustrated. With the first one that I call VM, that stands for vegetal and mineral. That is a very generic and still preliminary definition, corresponds to the majority of the objects that I was analyzing. Then, in order to confirm the observation made at a macroscopic level, we have been granted by the museum director the possibility of taking a total of 24 samples for petrographic analysis. So the study is still in progress, but it has already confirmed the presence of at least 2 of the groups that I was able to trace from a macroscopic point of view. Here I'm just showing you as an example this group that is called fibrous group because it's tempered with very thin and long fibers, which still needs to be defined because we know that they are coming from, they are vegetable, but we don't know exactly which kind of plant was used to temper, the alluvial clay. So basically, they are all made of alluvial clay from the Nile. It was, very easy to grab, clay from the Nile. So this was the base. And then, some other elements were added in order to obtain specific kind of pottery. Then we have this vegetal and mineral group. So that, again, consists of Nile alluvial clay fabric tempered with plant remains and fine minerals that could be attributed to alluvial nature of the deposits. So we cannot be 100% sure that they were added by the potters, but maybe they were just part of the alluvium of the Nile. And later, parallel to the macroscopic investigation and the petrographic analysis, we focus also on the observation of specific macro and micro traces left during the different phases of pottery production, according to the principles of the so-called technological approach. This methodology entails identifying the manufacturing chain operatoire based on the combination of diagnostic traces, which are then interpreted by referring to experimental and ethnographic reference data. And this is the technological approach proposed by Valentin Roux. So here you see a scheme, more or less, of the different steps. So starting from the roughing out, the preforming, and then the finishing steps. And for the predynastic period of Egypt, we are mainly dealing with the coil system. So no wheel throwing, because the potter's wheel was introduced in Egypt only during the Old Kingdom. So in the subsequent phase. So for the pre-dynastic phase, we have only handmade, let's say, without rotating kinetic energy pottery, basically with this coiling method. And here, just to show you an example with our material, what I meant when I say that we're observing macro traces. So here, for example, for this ball fragment, you can see these very threaded lines here that could just be the result of the polishing just using fingers, and sometimes you can still distinguish the fingerprints of the potter. Other kind of signs here, you can see these grooves that were obtained maybe with a hard tool during this scrapping operation. And another mark that is quite common is this that you can see here, indicated by the yellow arrow, that is called a resting mark, because here is where your tool was stopping while you were scraping the inner surface. So you can tell from observing these signs that they were using both the finger and hard tools to produce their pots. But a step further, as I was saying before, we were working mainly on fragments, but for the whole pots, we were not able, of course, to break them. So we were trying to find a way to look inside the pots without damaging them. And so after a successful application for this European Research Infrastructure for Heritage Science, IRIS, in 2022, The project was granted the opportunity to access the facilities of the Physics Institute of the Bologna University in order to perform on a selection of 34 specimens, X-ray CT scans. This non-destructive diagnostic technique was chosen as it offered the possibility of visualizing the internal structure of the analyzed objects and to have 3D reconstructions, which can significantly contribute to our knowledge of pottery manufacturing techniques and potter's choices. Here you can see some of the preliminary results of our investigation. So the larger technological group is the one identified in association with these bag-shaped, we call them, jars, characterized by the vegetable and mineral fabric. So the one that I showed you before. So the first step of the manufacturing process involved forming the base from a spiraled coil suggested by spiral fissures and spiral undulation on the surface. You can see here at the bottom. The walls then were formed by placing a coil at the periphery of the base. Here. The successive coils, yes?
Oh, we were losing you a bit, but I think
okay. Now
normal now.
Okay, perfect. So I was saying that, the junction between the coils, you can see here, for example, it means that the pots was, manufactured placing one coil on top of the other. And then for the rim, you can see that the everted necks and rims were shaped by folding the last coil outward. If we look at the 3D reconstruction, we can see, for example, that the recurrence of deep striations along the external and internal surfaces suggests that the shaping was completed by scraping the inner and outer surface with a hard tool. Traces are associated with elongated vertical depressions along the inner surface due by the pressure left by the hand to support the walls and avoid deformation due to the scrapping of the outer surface. Finally, threaded striations, as you can see here on top, left by the epidermal ridges suggest a smoothing by hand, and particularly fingertips, with horizontal gestures to regularize the inner band of the rim. Another group that I would like to show you is represented by the so-called fibrous groups that I showed you before, that is called fibrous according to the characteristic temper, which gives a peculiar texture to the paste observed in the fracture. So these very thin, elongated lines that you can see here in the fracture. The walls here were formed with coils that were very, very elongated, with very, very oblique joints visible in the radial section, which suggested they were placed by spreading, so not pinching, but spreading the coils alternately from the inside and from the outside. The inner face of closed pot is wet smoothed and characterized by bands of superficial and multiple striation that you can see in the bottom right, with multidirectional orientation, probably produced by the use of a hard tool, as witnessed by termination marks of the dragged tool. The outer surface was burnished. The color of the outer face ranges from deep brown to black, and sometimes strands of different colors are present on the same shirts. In most cases, the section that you can see here show a very thick black core. So coming now to the conclusion and our preliminary results of this case study. What have we accomplished so far? The complete sorting and inventory description of Predynastic pottery collection, the photographs and drawings of selected specimen, the chronotypological study, the petrographic study, and almost finished the technological study, the contextual study, so based on archival material in comparison with current excavations. And of course, we also improved museum narratives with a temporary exhibition that I curated in 2023 for the series that the museum calls in the researcher workshop, that is dedicated to show to the general public the work and the research work that the archaeologists are doing behind the scene. But of course, these are just the preliminary results. But I wanted to show you that even with like museum collection, forgotten museum collection, sometimes it's possible, to build new research project had to have, I think, very interesting results. And with this, I really thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Fede, for this excellent and detailed conference. It was very interesting to know some of your research work and to learn about this period of Egyptian archaeology that probably is well known as the dynastic period. And I have some comments and questions, a lot of questions. And afterwards, we are going to read the questions from our audience. Al público, por favor, si tienen preguntas, las pueden hacer en el chat de YouTube y se las haremos llegar a la doctora Ugliano. Well, congratulations for this titanic and difficult task that you're facing, recovering all this information that was not published from Schiaparelli, the archaeologist of Dr. Schiaparelli. Probably we face this problem everywhere, in which the pioneer archaeologists just didn't let enough information from their research work. So it's very important to recover the history of the places, in this case, pre-dynastic Egypt, that is not well documented, and we are starting with new projects. And you, as you said, you are doing now lines of investigations, now new scopes and concerns about the Egyptian archaeology. So you said that you were contrasting the archaeological context, but have you ever been able to find the workshops where this pottery was produced, to be able to prove or to support your hypothesis about the chain operatoire?
Okay, thank you, Hile, for the very difficult question. I mean, no. The answer is no, unfortunately. We are really lacking for pre-dynastic Egypt, really workshops. So also the definition, as I was saying, of domestic, production versus specialized production. There is also a lot of discussion on this topic, because why should we exclude that it was specialized, even if it was done, in a domestic environment? I mean, for Heliopolis, so far, no. But, the current excavations have started, bringing back to light, also productive area as the brewery. And for example, a lot of pottery and lithic tools were found associated with this material. So we are working together, with the archaeologists, excavating now the sites in order to try to make some hypotheses. But of course, this question about the type of production is really hard to define, and it's open, of course, to questions. And at the moment, we were just able, to define the basic steps of this production. But now we are also comparing. I didn't say it before, but the same kind of project is now going on with the lithic tools. So we are applying exactly the same methodology. So we also would like to see if it's comparing, you know, the lithic production with the pottery production. We can have, you know, new insights. And for example, we are starting to see some discrepancies between the two types of production. So we really need to work a lot on the interpretation. But of course, it still remains an interpretation. And that's why I was saying that, you know, I'm happy to, you know, provide the data set also for other, you know, scholars to use for their own, you know, also theoretical approach and practical approach in order to see if we can have different, you know, interpretations. So, yes.
Okay, thank you. And in the results of your analysis, I was wondering if you can determine if you said that the pottery, the source of the pottery is obviously the Nile, but the composition of the pottery probably could be different, and you could say that it could be a kind of exchange or local production in Heliopolis, for example, and if they were exchanging pottery from other parts, can you determine whether it is a local production or it was an exchange pottery, for example?
Okay, yes. I mean, for some kind of pottery, yes, but not the one made with Nile clay, because it's really, really regular, the composition along all, you know, the Nile. So even if with, you know, a detailed, let's say, petrographic analysis, it's not really possible to have this kind of definition. But for other kind of material that we use, for example, marl clay that was used for other kind of pottery, that is possible because we have some specific sources. So we can even locate the sources. That's why we decided to go for the technological approach, because what, you know, Dr. Jean Bajot, especially, and Vanessa Forte are trying to define is whether analyzing the different, you know, gestures that were involved in making the pottery, we can define if we're different people, people in its broader sense, without any kind of ethnic or, you know, racial connotations. So there could be families, there could be people from other places with different traditions. So with the petrographic analysis, this was not really possible. So that's why we're working mainly with the technological aspect, because we're trying, as I was saying, to have different approaches to go beyond where, you know, the more traditional ones are, you know, are not really giving us the answer. But for some material, yes, not unfortunately for the clay, Nile clay, because it's really homogeneous.
Okay, thank you. Is any, or probably it exists any project to publish online the catalogs that you produce from these studies?
I mean, we are planning now some publications, and we would like to make them, of course, open access, and also to share all the, let's say, raw data. So we are thinking about, I don't know, a repository, but as you know, it's quite difficult to find. We don't have, at the moment, we don't have a Museo Egizio, let's say, repository. So we were thinking, for example, to use a European one that is called Zenodo, where you can upload your raw data so that other people, for example, all the drawings that I produce, of course, they are not going to be published because there is not enough space, you know, in like traditional publications. So, but yes, we are planning now to find a solution and to make them available. Also also like the results of the CT scans, because then with like software, you can just, you know, download the CT scans and analyze it for yourself, because all of this was produced using, you know, European funding. So we would like, and we are also required, of course, to make them accessible. So, but of course, it's a problem also to find the best place where, you know, the repository with enough, you know, space, because
Yes.
it's a huge amount of data, and we don't have in Italy a national repository, as for example in the UK. I remember that they have one, So in Italy, we still don't have, I mean, they're planning to have one. So maybe in the future. But yeah, yes, of course, we are planning.
Yes,
Also through the Museo Egizio, also websites.
Okay, yes, that would be very interesting because you know, Egypt, it's like the dream of a lot of people in the world, around the world. So a lot of people would be interested in consulting catalogs, and probably they don't have the access or the resources to go to see the collections, but probably online it would be interesting. In Mexico, we have developed some online systems that are working, but as you said, we need all the technology to be this possible, to do this possible. So I know it's a difficult task. So we have some questions here from archaeologist Maria Teresa Garcia. She says, congratulations, excellent conference. Our friend, Duy Urbina, she says, first, congratulations for your excellent work. It's amazing what you can do when applying new technologies to minimize the impact on the materials. Regarding the contextual problem you faced, do you think analyzing the archives and comparing with current excavation gave you enough grounds to interpret the results, or did limited it?
Okay, also very difficult questions. Hello, Edwy. Questions. I think that for me was like fundamental to do this comparison because with the archives, I could reach a certain point, but then without looking at the excavations itself, I was also like a member of the excavation. Was for me was so important to go back to the site and see the situation myself, because otherwise, really, I wouldn't have really understand what also Schiaparelli was writing sometimes, because it was like so strange and it was really hard to decipher. So no, for me was really important. And from the other side, of course, for the Heliopolis project was so important to have an idea of what has been done before. So we were in fact sharing, knowledge and really working together. And I think that we reached some very interesting results and some new results. We published an article that, in fact, is open access, that is really about this dialogue between past and current excavation. And if you are interested, I published it with my co-author, that is the German colleague, Clara Dietze, and it's open access and it's available from the Rivista of the Museo Egizio. So we have a journal of the Museo Egizio that is completely free and open access. So if you are interested about the results, we were not analyzing the Predynastic settlement. We were working on another area of Heliopolis, because Clara was working for her PhD on an area that was really close to one excavated by Schiaparelli. So we were really could put together and also have new interpretations that were not possible in the past. So many scholars in the past tried, but they were at a certain point stuck. But now with this dialogue, I think it was really, fruitful. So I hope that we can go on. And of course, I cannot have like the really, fine stratigraphic sequence that Schiaparelli excavated. So still, I would never, ever be able to define sub-phases for my predynastic settlements, but at least I can more or less tell, when it started and when it ended. And it's something that it's new, because it was not known before, this phase of the predynastic settlement of Heliopolis. So definitely it was enough for me and was really, really important, this dialogue. I think also from a methodological point of view, other projects by the museum are going into this direction, because we found out that, in fact, really it's so important, because Schiaparelli published very few these excavations. So we are all dealing with this problem. And so far we found that this kind of, exchange, when we are lucky, to have this kind of exchange, is really, really important for us. So yes, definitely it was really important.
Okay, thank you. I have like some basic questions about pre-dynastic Egypt and even before, because I think that I don't know if we have okay, Edu says that please, I am really interested in the article and thanks for your answer. It's helpful to see how others overcome this problem present in so many of our archaeological collections.
Okay, I can send you the link then. So
yes.
if you're interested, or also to you, Elaine, if you want to share, I mean, as I said, it's open access. So
you sent me some basic bibliography, so I can share it as well from everyone who is interested on it. So
yes.
I have these questions about, for example, the down of Egyptian culture. Probably we have the erroneous perception or that Egypt or Egyptian culture is just one social group. But probably I was reading some of your articles and I read another ones, but probably there were some groups that in certain point they were unified, and that's when the dynastic period starts. Is it correct?
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's a very complicated situation. And because, of course, when we think about Egypt, we have in mind just pharaonic Egypt. So pharaohs, and then, hierarchy and the society, the pyramidal society and this kind of, even if it's not true, because also pharaonic Egypt, it's quite different. It lasts for more than four millennia. So, of course, it's changing a lot. But especially for the pre-dynastic, the situation before, the cultural unification, there was also political unification, was quite diverse. And in fact, scholars are still fighting sometimes about this topic, because, it was like a military conquest. It was like acculturation, as I was saying before, or it was, people from the north that were just, taking from the south some, traditions. It's really hard. And other scholars are even, talking about regionality. So not even two big clusters, but each side, more or less, was, different somehow, producing like very specific kind of material culture. So we know that at a certain point they adopted these, unified, especially we can see it in the pottery, because this is the, the main, the key, the privileged observation point for this. But not only like burial customs, for examples, and writings, and titles and hierarchy. But yes, before there is a very long phase, so more or less 1 millennium, where these different groups are in fact interacting. We should always bear in mind that those people were moving a lot. The Nile itself is like a highway, so they were really moving a lot along the country, and also between the oases that are on the western and eastern part, and the Nile Valley itself. So people, and together with, of course, people from Near East, so through the Sinai, and they were in constant contact with other people. So there is still a lot of research to be done. And in fact, especially the excavation of pre-dynastic sites from the Delta is quite new. I mean, from the 1980s, so less than 40 years. So really, we still have to work a lot on also in the interpretation of this new data that have been produced so far. Yes, but definitely yes.
Okay, thank you. If you need some time and an assistant, I can I can go with you happily because well, it's very interesting. It's not my specialization, but I can specialize it. I could specialize in Egypt archaeology with no problem.
Oh, you know that you are more than welcome. You know, we have a lot of materials still, you know,
Oh,
to be studied, and you know, especially museum collections.
yes,
So there is
I
still a
think
lot
that
to
a
do.
lot of Mexican colleagues will be really happy to go with you.
I'm waiting for you all, especially if you have the chance to pass by Italy at the end of the year. We are opening new museum sections and we are going to celebrate, you know, the bicentenary. So
Oh,
I
that would
really hope that you can manage somehow
oh,
to join us.
it
That
will
would be
be
great.
really great. Well, but we are out of time, and I really appreciate and thank you very much, Fede, that we are very pleased with this wonderful conference. I hope this is not the last time you join our your knowledge with us, and you are always welcome to our institute, the Instituto Nacional de Antropología e Historia, to give any conference or whatever you want.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It was like a pleasure for me to be here and to see you again. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you. Agradecemos principalmente a INATV y a la doctora Federica Ugliano. Nos vemos la próxima sesión, que es el jueves 30 a las 10. Tenemos un cambio de horarios a las 10 de la mañana con el tema uso de análisis estadísticos espaciales para estudiar los patrones de asentamiento indígena en el noreste de República Dominicana, que será impartida por el doctor Eduardo Herrera Malatesta y el doctor Sebastián de Valeriola. Hasta pronto, muchas gracias. Thank you, Fede.